the underground poker room in Philadelphia sits beneath a warehouse on Broad Street, hidden behind brick walls 3 feet thick and a door that doesn't exist on any city map. The air tastes of tobacco and sweat and desperation, curling upward in gray ribbons under lights that cast everything the color of old money. Green felt tables stretch across the concrete floor, and on the center table, towers of cash reach toward the ceiling like monuments to ruin and salvation. Valentina Chen stands at that center table. 27 years old but looking like someone who has lived 40. Her delivery uniform hangs loose on her frame, stained with rain and coffee from the morning shift that started before sunrise and will not end until after midnight. Her canvas backpack is pressed against her ribs like a shield. Her hands shake as she places something on the felt in front of her. $2 in crumpled bills. 47 cents in coins scraped from her car's cup holders. That is everything. Across from her sits Alessandro Caruso. 49 years old. 6'2". Shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of 15 criminal enterprises without bending. His suit costs more than Valentina's car. His watch costs more than her rent for 3 months. His dark eyes, storm gray at the edges where age is starting to touch him, fix on her shaking hands with an intensity that makes the air around the table turn thin and cold. His lieutenants Carlo and Nino flank him on both sides. Carlo is built like a granite wall. Nino moves like smoke. Both have been with Alessandro for 15 years. Both have seen him order executions without changing his expression. Both have seen him hold a man's head underwater for 43 seconds and emerge from it checking his watch. Neither has ever seen him like this. Around the table, 20 hardened men in suits that cost more than luxury cars stand frozen in absolute silence. The kind of silence that happens when the natural order of the world bends and everyone holds their breath waiting to see if reality will snap back or change forever. Cigarette smoke hangs suspended in the air like a prayer that cannot find its answer. Valentina's voice comes out barely a whisper, trembling like a candle in the wind. This is for Noah. For your son. I am placing everything I have. The camera lens catches the movement of Alessandro's jaw. Once. His dark eyes do not leave her hands. The numbers appear in white text against the dim gold of the room. $65,000. 5 days. Noah needs heart valve replacement surgery or he will not see 9 years old. Valentina has $2.47 remaining on the planet Earth. Someone in the room breathes. It echoes like a gunshot in the silence. Carlo leans toward Nino, so quiet that only his partner hears him. In 15 years I have never seen him break. Alessandro sets down his cards. His hands are steady. His face does not move. But there in the corner of his right eye, gathering at the edge like morning dew, is moisture that has not been there in decades. When he speaks, his voice comes out deep and solid like an oath. All in. He pushes $65,000 forward. The stack lands on the felt with a sound like thunder rolling across water. $40,000 he was already prepared to lose. $25,000 from his personal account. Money he withdrew from the vault at 3 in the morning because a woman he met for the first time 6 hours ago told him her son was dying. Valentina looks at the pile. Then at Alessandro. Then at the pile again. You are not even playing anymore, she says. No, he answers. I am not. Before we continue, drop a like if this story is hitting you the way it is hitting us. Share it with someone who needs to hear that miracles can happen even in the darkest moments. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next tomorrow. Because what's coming will shock you in ways you cannot imagine. Now let us go back to the beginning, to understand how a homeless delivery girl and a mafia boss's paths crossed on one humid August night that changed everything. 6 hours earlier. 3 in the morning on a Tuesday. The forecast called for storms and the storms delivered. Valentina sits in the driver's seat of her 2008 Honda Civic parked behind a diner on Marshall Street. Rain hammers the roof like fists trying to break through. The windows are fogged from her breath. Noah sleeps in the passenger seat beside her, curled up under a jacket that once belonged to her mother, his small chest rising and falling in the darkness while she keeps watch. She has $17 in her wallet. 17. She counted it 4 times to make sure the number did not change. It does not change. $17 and a foreclosure notice that arrived last Tuesday with her name on it like a curse. Noah needs surgery. The cardiologist explained it 3 weeks ago in a voice that sounded like he was reading words he had read 1,000 times before. Heart murmur. Valve replacement. Without surgery, his life expectancy decreases. With surgery, normal childhood. Normal playground. Normal breath that does not come in gasps after climbing stairs. The cost is $47,000. Valentina has saved $2,100 of it. In 8 years of working double shifts at the diner, of eating from the garbage, of showering at a gym membership she paid $5 a month to access, of drying her hair under hand dryers in gas station bathrooms. She has saved $2,100. She needs $45,000 more in 23 days or the hospital will place Noah's name on a waiting list that moves like a glacier. Slow. Inevitable. Merciless. Her phone buzzes. Text from Derek Collins, the manager of the diner where she works. The message glows blue in the darkness. Called you home sick. Need you back at 6 a.m. Extra shift opens up. Yours if you want it. Valentina's thumbs move across the phone. Yes. Thank you. She does not sleep. She never sleeps when Noah is in the car. She sits in the darkness and listens to his breathing and counts how many more shifts it will take to save what she needs. 1,243 more shifts. At 5 shifts a week, that is 248 weeks. That is for years and 8 months. Noah will be 13 years old. The rain intensifies. The wind picks up speed and direction, pressing against the car from the west, making it rock slightly. Valentina reaches over and adjusts Noah's jacket, pulling it up to his chin. He does not wake. His small hand grips an old coloring book on his lap, one she found in a church donation bin last month. Pages torn out of it, colors scribbled across them, some of them labeled in his careful child's handwriting. Colors for happy days. Colors for sad days. When he feels sad, look at this. Thunder splits the sky open. The electricity of it flashes across the windshield and in that moment of white light, Valentina sees the gas gauge. Empty. Below empty. The little red line sitting at the absolute bottom like a final judgment. She has driven the car on fumes for 3 days. The fuel pump sounds like an old man wheezing. She has been rationing every gallon, plotting routes on her phone that require the least amount of driving. But today she picked up Noah from the shelter 30 miles across the city because his breathing had gotten worse and she wanted him in a place where she could watch him through the night instead of leaving him with strangers. 30 miles. On fumes. The car is going to die on the highway. She turns the key. The engine turns over, catches, holds. She pulls onto Marshall Street, heads east toward I-76, prays to a God she stopped believing in 3 years ago that the universe will show her one small mercy. The highway is empty. Just rain and darkness and the occasional truck pushing through the storm like a metal animal trying to outrun the weather. Her headlights push maybe 50 feet into the darkness before the rain swallows them whole. 60 miles per hour. The needle is dropping on the fuel gauge. 55 miles per hour. The car is pulling left, trying to conserve. 48 miles per hour. And then the engine coughs. Not a cough. A death rattle. Valentina feels it happen before she hears it. The car losing power, the steering wheel getting heavy, the pedals becoming unresponsive. She guides it toward the shoulder with the last momentum it possesses. The car rolls onto the wet grass and gravel and comes to rest at the edge of a field where the darkness is so complete it looks like a hole in reality. She turns the key. Nothing. Again. Nothing. Again. A grinding sound that means the battery is dying too, pulled down by the effort of trying to start an engine that has finally given up every ghost it possessed. The silence that follows is total. Valentina sits with her hands on the steering wheel. The rain continues hammering. She does not cry. Her tears have dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus 3 years ago, somewhere between the life she had and the life she has now. She reaches over and touches Noah's forehead. Warm. Good. Fever-breaking finally. She pulls the foreclosure notice from the glove compartment. The paper has been folded and unfolded so many times it is starting to tear along the creases. The numbers are printed in an official font that makes them look more real than reality. $22,000. 60 days. Her name and Noah's name. The house that belonged to her mother, that Valentina inherited when her mother died, that the bank is now reclaiming because she missed 6 months of payments trying to save for surgery. $22,000 in debt. $45,000 in medical bills. $17 in her pocket. And a son whose small chest rises and falls in the darkness beside her. She puts her head on the steering wheel and finally allows herself to understand that she is not going to make it. That sometime in the next 2 months, everything is going to fall away. The car. The house. Noah will go into foster care and she will be invisible again in a way she has never been before. That is when the headlights appear. They come from behind her, cutting through the rain like searchlights finding an escaped prisoner. Valentina's heart jumps. The headlights approach, and she realizes they are not a single car. They are multiple cars. The lead vehicle is a black SUV, expensive, pristine even in the rain. Behind it, 2 more. Behind those, 1 more at a distance, waiting. A convoy. The lead SUV slows. Its window lowers with mechanical precision. Valentina can see a man's silhouette in the darkness inside, backlit by the interior lights of a vehicle that costs more than every car she has ever owned combined. The man's voice reaches her through the rain and the distance between the vehicles. Deep. Controlled. A voice that has learned that power does not need to be loud. Is your vehicle disabled? Valentina's hands are shaking. She does not know why. Something in her recognizes something in that voice. A danger that is not directed at her? A danger that is directed at everyone, everywhere, all the time. Yes, she says. It is. The SUV's door opens. Alessandro Caruso steps out into the rain without hesitation, without an umbrella, without any acknowledgement that the weather is trying to erase the world. He is wearing a cashmere coat that costs $17,000. It is already soaked through. He walks toward her car. His movement is unhurried, measured, each step controlled like a general surveying a battlefield he has already won. Behind him, Carlo and Nino emerge from the vehicle. Beside them, 2 other men in suits that cost more than Valentina's life. When he reaches her window, Valentina sees his face for the first time. Dark eyes. A scar running from his left temple to his cheekbone, thin as a blade. Hair starting to gray at the temples in a way that makes him look simultaneously older and more dangerous, like a weapon that has been used so many times it has developed a patina. His eyes move past her. They land on Noah. The boy sleeps on, unaware that his life is about to change in ways neither of them can yet comprehend. Alessandro's eyes return to Valentina's. "Open the door," he says, and his voice carries no question mark at the end. In the sprawling, restless city of Philadelphia lived a young woman named Valentina Chen. To the wealthy patrons she served at the Riverside Hotel restaurant and the hurried crowd she navigated on her delivery routes, she was nearly invisible, just another girl in a stained uniform trying to survive. She moved through the world like a ghost, quiet, faithful, invisible. Valentina showered at a Planet Fitness she paid $5 a month to access, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like dying insects as she scrubbed her skin with hotel soap she pocketed from work. She dried her hair under the hand dryers in gas station bathrooms, the hot air scalding her neck while she stared at her reflection, 26 years old but looking decades older, with dark circles under her eyes like bruises that would never fade. Everything that mattered fit in a canvas backpack stuffed behind the driver's seat of her 2008 Honda Civic with 240,000 miles on the odometer and a cracked windshield that spiderwebbed across her line of sight like a map of her own braking. 2 changes of clothes. Noah's asthma inhaler. A photograph of her mother, faded and soft at the edges from being held too many times. The Riverside Hotel sat downtown, all marble and gold leaf, a place where doormen wore white gloves and the ice in whiskey glasses cost more than Valentina's hourly wage. She worked the evening shift, 5 nights a week, carrying trays up narrow service elevators to rooms where people spent more on a single night than she earned in a month. They never saw her face. She had learned to move in such a way that she disappeared into the walls, became part of the architecture, just a pair of hands delivering plates and clearing debris. When guests did notice her, it was only to complain. The soup was cold. The wine was the wrong temperature. She should smile more. She should speak less. The tips were inconsistent, sometimes generous, sometimes nothing at all. But there was a system, a way the money moved. Derek Collins, the restaurant manager, collected the tips at the end of each shift. Thin-lipped. Cold-eyed. A man who wore cologne that smelled like old money and knew cruelty. He would count the bills slowly, deliberately, with a smile that never reached his eyes, and then he would hand Valentina her portion. Except the portion never matched what she had seen in the jar. There were always discrepancies. Always shortages. Always an explanation that made it seem like her mistake. The group at table 8 didn't pay with a card, Derek would say. They left cash, but I'm not sure of the amount. Maybe there was less than you thought. Valentina never argued. She could not afford to argue. She needed this job. She needed every dollar it could provide, even if those dollars were being stolen from her like air from a drowning person. Some nights the shelter on Market Street had beds available. She would walk Noah there after work, his small hand in hers, and they would sleep in a room with 30 other people, the air thick with breathing and sorrow. Other nights the shelter was full, its doors locked against the cold, and Valentina and her son would return to the car. She would push the front seats together to create a flat surface, and Noah would curl against her chest, his small 6-year-old body fitting into the curve of her arms like he had been designed for this exact purpose. She would keep watch from the darkness, her $2 folded in her pocket like a prayer, listening to the sounds of the city outside, sirens in the distance, the rumble of trucks on the interstate, the occasional shout of someone else who had nowhere to go. Noah had been born with a congenital heart defect. The doctor said it with clinical precision, as if the words had no weight, as if they were just describing a mechanical flaw rather than a death sentence wrapped in skin and hope. A faulty valve. Irregular heartbeat. Poor oxygenation. He tired easily. Simple activities left him breathless. Climbing stairs was an ordeal. Running was something other children did, something Noah watched from the sidelines with a quiet acceptance that broke Valentina's heart every single day. She had taken him to the free clinic on 8th Street. The doctor there, an older woman with kind eyes and exhausted shoulders, had been honest. He would need surgery. Not immediately, but soon. Within the next year, ideally. The faulty valve would need to be replaced. Without the surgery, his heart would simply wear out, like an engine running on fumes. The cost was $65,000. $65,000. Valentina had stood in that clinic room and felt the ground open beneath her. $65,000. She made maybe $22,000 a year if she was lucky, if she picked up extra shifts, if Derek did not steal from her tips. She had no insurance. She had no savings. She had $2 in her pocket, and it was Wednesday, and she needed that money to last until Friday. The foreclosure notice had arrived 3 weeks later. Her apartment, a small studio in North Philadelphia that she had managed to secure 2 years ago, had been falling behind on payments. She had missed 3 months. The landlord had issued warnings. She had promised to catch up. But the promised payments never came because there was no money to promise with. There was only the endless mathematics of survival. Rent or food. Food or Noah's medications. Medications or heat in the winter. You could never choose all four. You could barely choose two. The notice was printed in official language, dense and grey as stone, and it said she had 30 days. After 30 days, she would be evicted. After 30 days, she and Noah would belong entirely to the shelters and the streets. The paper was crumpled now, worn soft at the edges from being held too many times, from being read and reread as if the words might somehow change if you looked at them differently. They never did. Derek Collins knew about her situation. He had overheard her on the phone with the landlord one afternoon while she was counting out a deposit in the office. He had smiled that smile of his, the one that looked like a knife wrapped in ice. "That's rough," he had said. "You should pick up more shifts. Put in the work. That's what separates the ones who make it from the ones who don't." She was already working 5 nights a week. The restaurant did not have more shifts to offer. But she understood what Derek meant. He meant there were other ways to earn money. He meant she should be grateful for his generosity, for allowing her to work at all, for giving her access to the tips in that jar, even though he was stealing from her constantly. Alongside Derek in this quiet theft was a woman named Cordelia Blackwood. Cordelia was a regular at the restaurant, a wealthy woman in her late 50s with a face that had been pulled so tight it looked like it might tear, and jewelry that caught the light like captured stars. She came in every Thursday night, always alone, always ordering the most expensive things on the menu and eating very little of it. But what mattered was how she treated Valentina. The dismissals. The snapping of fingers. The requests delivered as demands. "Bring this. Clear that. Why are you still standing there?" And Valentina, invisible Valentina, would simply nod and comply. Because Cordelia was a woman of means, and women of means had power that extended far beyond the walls of the restaurant. They had connections. They had influence. They could destroy you with a single word if you gave them reason to. It was during one of these Thursday nights, 3 days before the cold rain and the disabled car and the arrival of Alessandro Caruso, that everything began to fracture. Valentina was clearing plates from Cordelia's table when she overheard the woman speaking to Derek in the kitchen. "The girl," Cordelia was saying. "The delivery driver. She's still working here." "Every night," Derek replied. "She delivered my package to the wrong address last month. I had to go and retrieve it myself. From a neighborhood that was absolutely filthy. The inconvenience was extraordinary." Derek's voice, when he responded, carried that familiar tone. The tone that meant he was about to betray someone. "She's struggling. Single mother. No resources. She doesn't know how to do things properly. Then perhaps she shouldn't be doing them at all." The conversation moved on, but Valentina had heard enough. She understood what was being decided in that moment. Her employment was being weighed and found insufficient. Cordelia Blackwood, with her pulled face and her captured stars, had determined that Valentina was not worth the space she occupied in the world. That night, in the car with Noah sleeping beside her, Valentina counted her money 3 times. $2. She had $2 and 3 days before the foreclosure became official and her son lost the only stable place he had ever known. She had $2 and a faulty heart in her chest that beat too fast and too hard, like it was trying to break free from the cage of her ribs. She did not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus 2 years ago, when she was fleeing a life that had become too dangerous to survive. She just sat in the darkness and held her son and listened to the rain begin to fall, light at first, then heavier, then turning into something that sounded like a judgment being rendered from the sky itself. The storm grew through the night. By morning, it was absolute. By the time Valentina had to make her delivery route, 3 packages to addresses across the city, for which she would be paid approximately $32 before Derek took his cut, the rain was falling in sheets, and the wind was tearing at everything loose. She left Noah with a woman named Rosa who ran an informal childcare operation out of her basement. Rosa was kind, one of the few truly kind people Valentina had encountered, and she charged only what Valentina could afford, which was nothing, and so Valentina brought her groceries instead, items she purchased with the few dollars she earned, food she bought rather than ate because Rosa's grandchildren were hungry too. By evening, with 3 deliveries completed and the storm worsening, Valentina's car began to make a sound. A grinding sound. A sound like something breaking inside the engine, some crucial part surrendering to the miles and the age and the simple fact of being pushed beyond its capacity for too long. She was on the highway, heading toward the shelter where she would pick up Noah before finding somewhere to sleep, when the steering became difficult. The engine coughed. The dashboard lights flickered. And then, as if the car itself had made a final decision, the entire vehicle died on the shoulder of the interstate, right lanes rushing past, the rain coming down like the sky was trying to wash everything away. Valentina sat in the darkness, her hands on the steering wheel, and she did not move. She could not move. If she moved, she would have to figure out what came next. She would have to call a tow truck she could not afford. She would have to explain to Noah why they could not get to the shelter. She would have to count the money in her pocket again and face the mathematics of survival with one fewer resource than she had possessed just hours before. The rain hammered against the windows. And then, through the downpour, she saw lights. Not the lights of other cars, but the organized, synchronized lights of something structured and deliberate. Black SUVs emerging from the rain like something from a fever dream, headlights cutting through the darkness like judgment, slowing as they approached her disabled vehicle. The convoy had 5 vehicles in total. They moved with a precision that suggested coordination, that suggested these men had practiced this kind of approach many times before. They surrounded her car without making it seem threatening, though it was absolutely threatening. They simply appeared, and the world became smaller, became organized around the fact of their presence. The first vehicle, the lead vehicle, pulled alongside her. Through the rain-streaked glass, Valentina could see a figure in the driver's seat, could see the suggestion of a man's silhouette backlit by interior lights of a vehicle that cost more than every car she had ever owned combined. The man's voice reached her through the rain and the distance between the vehicles. Deep. Controlled. A voice that had learned that power does not need to be loud. Is your vehicle disabled? Valentina's hands were shaking. She did not know why. Something in her recognized something in that voice. A danger that was not directed at her. A danger that was directed at everyone, everywhere, all the time. Yes, she said. It is. The SUV's door opened. Alessandro Caruso stepped out into the rain without hesitation, without an umbrella, without any acknowledgement that the weather was trying to erase the world. He was wearing a cashmere coat that cost $17,000. It was already soaked through. He walked toward her car. His movement was unhurried, measured, each step controlled like a general surveying a battlefield he had already won. Behind him, Carlo and Nino emerged from the vehicle. Beside them, 2 other men in suits that cost more than Valentina's life savings, which was to say the suits cost more than Valentina possessed in any form whatsoever. When he reached her window, Valentina saw his face for the first time. Dark eyes. A scar running from his left temple to his cheekbone, thin as a blade. Hair starting to gray at the temples in a way that made him look simultaneously older and more dangerous, like a weapon that has been used so many times it has developed a patina. His eyes moved past her. They landed on Noah, who was asleep in the passenger seat, his small chest rising and falling with the difficult rhythm of his faulty heart. Alessandro's eyes returned to Valentina's. "Open the door," he said, and his voice carried no question mark at the end. She opened the door to the hotel room and found it immediately. A single sheet of paper, folded in half, slipped beneath the door like a threat. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The paper was thick, expensive stock, the kind that cost money. The words were typewritten, each letter pressed with deliberate force. Your son's surgery is in 3 days. Accidents happen in hospitals. Stay in your place. Valentina's breath stopped. She read it again. Then again. The paper felt like it was burning her fingers. Noah was asleep in the bedroom, his small chest rising and falling in that shallow rhythm she had learned to listen for at night, the rhythm that said his heart was working too hard, always working too hard. She closed the door quietly and sat on the edge of the bed, the note still in her hands, and tried to understand what this meant. Someone knew. Someone knew about the surgery. Someone knew about Alessandro. Someone was threatening her child. She thought of Derek's face in the storage room, his breath reeking of whiskey, his hand gripping her wrist. "You still work for me." She thought of Cordelia Blackwood's smile, sharp as a blade, the way she had leaned close enough that Valentina could smell the expensive perfume, jasmine and something darker, something that smelled like money and cruelty mixed together. "Prove it," Cordelia had said. "Or I press charges." Valentina pulled out her phone. Her hand moved to dial Alessandro's number, but she stopped. If she called him, if she told him what the note said, what would he do? She already knew the answer. She had seen his face when he spoke about his brother, about the 12 people who died, about the choice he had made between survival and mercy. This was her fault. She had drawn his attention. She had accepted his help. She had let herself believe, for just a few days, that she could have something better than the life she had been living in her car. And now that fantasy was threatening her son. The rain started at midnight. Heavy drops against the window, the kind of rain that sounded like 1,000 fingers drumming on glass. Valentina did not sleep. She sat in the chair by the window and watched the city lights blur in the darkness, each one reflecting off the wet pavement like a fallen star. At 3:51 in the morning, her phone rang. The screen lit up with an unknown number. She answered. "Is Noah asleep?" It was a woman's voice. Older. Cold as the rain outside. "Who is this?" Valentina whispered. "Someone who knows exactly where you are. Someone who knows when Noah has his surgery. Someone who knows the name of the surgeon, Dr. Morrison, room 412 at Philadelphia General, surgery scheduled for 6 a.m. on Friday morning." Valentina's blood turned to ice. The woman continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "Your Mafia boyfriend thinks he can buy his way into redemption by saving a street rat and her defective child. But he cannot. And neither can you. Derek Collins has been very helpful in explaining your real situation to me. You are a thief. A liar. An unfit mother. One phone call to Child Protective Services and Noah goes into the system. And then who pays for the surgery? What do you want?" Valentina's voice was barely a whisper. "I want you to understand something very clearly. You belong to the margins. You belong in the shadows. And if you try to climb into the light, there are people who will push you back down. People like me. People like Derek. People everywhere, Valentina, who believe that some humans are simply worth less than others. You are worth less. Noah is worth less. And no amount of money from Mr. Caruso will ever change that fundamental truth." The line went dead. Valentina sat in the darkness, the phone still pressed to her ear, and felt something break inside her chest. Not her hope. She had given up hope years ago. Something deeper. Something that had been holding together the pieces of her soul, keeping her moving forward. That thing cracked, and the pieces started to fall. She thought about walking away. Leaving the hotel tonight. Taking Noah and disappearing back into the margins where she belonged. At least there, no one would threaten him. At least there, the stakes were only her own survival. But then she remembered Dr. Morrison's face when he had examined Noah at Philadelphia General. The concern in his eyes. The gentle way he had placed his stethoscope on Noah's chest and listened to that broken heart beating. 2 weeks, he had said. Maybe 3. But after that, his voice had become very quiet. She had 2 weeks to get that surgery done. 2 weeks before the cost became irrelevant because there would be no child left to save. Valentina pulled up Alessandro's number again. Her thumb hovered over the call button. She did not press it. Instead, she texted 3 words, "We need to talk." The response came instantly, "Downstairs. Conference room B now." She dressed quietly, moving through the pre-dawn darkness without turning on any lights. In the elevator, she caught her reflection in the polished steel doors. A woman with dark hair plastered to her skull, eyes hollow as a ghost's, wearing clothes that did not belong to her, a borrowed bathrobe from the hotel, soft cotton that had cost more money than she had held in her hands in 5 years. She did not recognize herself anymore. Alessandro was waiting in the conference room with Marco, his most trusted lieutenant, a man with silver threading through his black hair and eyes that had seen things no man should see. On the table between them were 2 pieces of paper. One was the threat note she had found under her door. The other was a bank transfer document showing $5,000 moving from Cordelia Blackwood's account into Derek Collins's account, dated 3 days ago. "Sit," Alessandro said. His voice was quiet, but beneath it ran something that sounded like a blade being sharpened. She Saturday. Her hands would not stop shaking. "Tell me everything," he said. So she did. She told him about Derek cornering her in the storage room, about his threats regarding child protective services. She told him about Cordelia's accusations of theft, about the money the hotel manager had stolen and blamed on her. She told him about the phone call at 3:13 in the morning, Cordelia's voice like ice water poured into her ear. Marco's jaw tightened as she spoke. When she finished, he leaned close to Alessandro and whispered something in Italian, rapid and harsh. Alessandro listened without expression, then nodded once. "They made a mistake," Alessandro said finally. "They revealed themselves. They showed you the shape of their fear. And fear is something I understand very well. What are you going to do?" Valentina asked. "What I should have done the night I found you on that highway," Alessandro said. "I am going to stop pretending that I can protect you from a distance. I am going to stop letting you pretend that you can handle this alone. And I am going to make sure that everyone who has touched your life with cruelty understands that there is a cost to that choice." He stood. Marco stood with him. "You will stay in this room," Alessandro said. "Do not leave. Do not answer the phone unless it is me. In 3 hours, Noah has his surgery. In 3 hours, this begins. And when it is finished, Valentina, you will never look over your shoulder again." He walked toward the door, Marco following. At the threshold, Alessandro paused. "My brother was right about one thing," he said without turning around. "Some men are capable of mercy. The question is not whether they are capable. The question is whether they have the courage to show it. I am about to show you what that courage looks like." The door closed behind him. Valentina sat alone in the conference room as the first light of dawn touched the windows. Outside, the city was waking up. Cars moved on the streets. People walked on sidewalks. Somewhere in this city, Derek Collins was probably getting ready for work. Cordelia Blackwood was probably sipping coffee from a cup that cost as much as Noah's monthly medication. They had no idea what was coming. The rain continued to fall. The marble floors of the Philadelphia General Hotel lobby stretched beneath Valentina's feet like the floor of a cathedral, cold and echoing and impossibly vast. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, casting light that made everything gleam except her, except the way her body shook as 2 police officers moved toward her with hands already reaching for their belts. The radio static crackled against their shoulders. Her breath came shallow, rapid, like a bird trapped in a cage made of its own ribs. Derek Collins stood beside Cordelia Blackwood near the front desk, and his face held the expression of a man who had finally found permission to be cruel. Cordelia's smile was paper-thin, a knife wrapped in silk. She held out a tablet toward the officers, her manicured fingers steady as stone. After reviewing the security footage, Cordelia said, her voice smooth as poison honey, "We discovered she has been stealing from us for months. Cash from the register. Tips that belong to other employees. We tried to handle this privately, but we have no choice now." The tablet showed video. Valentina's own image, pixelated and distorted, appearing to slip cash into her pocket. It was not her. She knew it was not her. But the officers did not know that. The hotel manager did not know that. Cordelia had made sure of that. "That is not real," Valentina said, and her voice sounded small, fractured, like a glass dropped on tile. "I never stole anything." "I never?" Cordelia stepped closer. "You are a homeless woman with a criminal history. Who do you think they will believe?" The words landed like stones. Valentina's legs began to fail her. The marble floor tilted. Her whole body trembled, not from fear for herself but from a knowledge that cut deeper than any blade. If they took her now, if the police handcuffs closed around her wrists, Noah would go into surgery tomorrow without her. He would wake in a recovery room reaching for a mother who was not there. He would call for her in the darkness and hear only machines. If Cordelia pressed charges, if the system moved the way the system always moved for women like Valentina, child services would be waiting. They would take him. They would fold him into the machinery of the state the way they folded all children without mothers. She could feel the world collapsing inward. The $2 in her pocket, the only money she had to her name, felt like an anchor dragging her down into depths from which no one had ever surfaced. Her vision blurred. Colors bled into each other. The chandeliers became halos of light that burned to look at. "Maybe I should confess," a voice whispered inside her. "Say I did it. Take whatever comes. At least Noah gets his surgery. At least he lives. At least that one thing is certain." Her knees buckled. Then she felt it. A small pressure against her leg, light and solid as prayer. She looked down through the hotel window. In the back of Cordelia's Mercedes parked outside on the street, Noah pressed his small hand against the glass. His face was pressed sideways against the window, eyes searching for her. He was smiling. Waiting. Trusting with the whole weight of his 5-year-old faith that his mother would fix this. That she would not let the world break. Something changed in her spine. Some small thread of light that had not yet been extinguished refused to go dark. She straightened. Looked directly into Cordelia's eyes. "No," Valentina said. Her voice was thin but steady, like ice holding its shape. "I did not steal anything. And you know it." The hotel doors burst open. Alessandro Caruso entered like a man walking into a room he owned, which, in some way, he did. 12 men in black tactical gear moved with him, spreading through the lobby in perfect silence, their shoes making no sound on the marble, their bodies positioning themselves at every exit with the precision of chess pieces. Carlo and Nino flanked Alessandro on either side. Behind them, four figures in dark windbreakers with gold FBI badges visible on their chests moved with the same choreographed intention. The police officers froze. Recognition flickered across their faces. Derek Collins's color drained completely, leaving him the shade of old paper. Alessandro's voice cut through the lobby like a blade through still water. "Step away from her. Now." The officers stepped away. "This does not concern you, Mr. Caruso," Cordelia said, but something had cracked in her composure. The smile flickered. Her hand went to her throat. "Actually," Alessandro said, "it concerns me very much." He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Valentina's annual salary, an open white shirt beneath it, and around one wrist a silver watch that caught the light. His eyes were dark and fixed on Cordelia with the weight of absolute certainty. "You see, when someone threatens a person under my protection, I take an interest." Carlo stepped forward holding a tablet. His face was expressionless. "For the past 72 hours, we have been conducting our own investigation. This is the real security footage. Unedited. Raw data pulled directly from the hotel servers." He turned the tablet toward the officers. "This shows Cordelia Blackwood entering the hotel office on 17 separate occasions over 6 months. Accessing the safe. Removing cash. Altering the digital records to blame Valentina." One of the FBI agents stepped forward, his badge catching the light. "We have been building a case against Ms. Blackwood for financial fraud across multiple properties for the past 8 months. This is the evidence we needed to move forward with federal charges." Cordelia's perfect composure cracked like ice under pressure. "You cannot do this. Do you know who I am? My lawyers will. Your lawyers, Alessandro said quietly, are currently being raided. Along with your home. Your office. Your country club. The FBI moved at dawn. He turned his attention to Derek Collins, who had begun to back away, searching for an exit that no longer existed. Carlo handed Alessandro a folder thick with documents. Alessandro opened it slowly, deliberately, letting Derek see his own crimes listed in detail. Sexual harassment complaints, Alessandro said. 12 women. 8 years. All suppressed through payment. All buried. All found by people who know how to look in the places where secrets hide. Derek's legs gave out. He collapsed against the front desk, his whole body trembling like a wounded animal backed into a corner. His voice came out as a sob. Please. I will give back the money. I will cooperate. I will. The FBI agent was already moving forward with handcuffs. Derek Collins, you are under arrest for theft, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Cordelia Blackwood, you are under arrest for those charges plus wire fraud and racketeering. Both of you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The handcuffs closed around Derek's wrists with a sound like a lock turning. He wept openly, his body folded in half as the officers led him toward the doors. Outside, camera flashes erupted. News crews had already gathered. The arrest was being broadcast live. Cordelia's face crumpled when the metal touched her skin. The ice melted. For just a moment, the mask fell away completely, revealing something small and terrified beneath. But then she straightened, and the coldness returned, though it was a thinner thing now, brittle as frost. Alessandro leaned close to her ear. His voice dropped so only she could hear. Death would be too quick. Too easy. Too merciful. You are going to live a very long time in a very small cell. 40 years federal. No parole. And every single day, you will remember the moment you chose cruelty over kindness. The FBI agents led her out. The doors closed behind them. The lobby fell silent except for the muted sound of news helicopters circling outside and the distant wail of sirens moving through the city streets. Carlo turned to Alessandro and nodded. The DA is confirming the sentence. 40 years minimum. Both of them. Alessandro did not respond immediately. He stood very still for a long moment, his dark eyes fixed on the spot where Cordelia had stood. Then his expression shifted. Something in his face softened, like stone beginning to crack open. He turned to Valentina. Noah's surgery, he said. Tomorrow at 8 p.m. Dr. Morrison is the best in the city. I have already spoken to him. He will have the surgical team assembled and ready. The anesthesia is the safest available. The recovery rooms are already prepared. He paused. I will be there. Valentina could not speak. The words had left her body. All she could do was nod as tears began to stream down her face, rolling down her cheeks like rain on a window. Her whole body shook, but this time not from fear. From relief. From the knowledge that somewhere in the machinery of fate, the scales had finally tipped toward mercy instead of cruelty. Alessandro reached out and gently touched her shoulder. His hand was warm. His voice, when he spoke again, was low and steady as thunder. You are not invisible anymore, Valentina. You never were. I simply needed to make everyone else see it. Outside the hospital windows, the Philadelphia skyline glowed against the darkening sky. The rain had stopped. Stars were beginning to emerge between the clouds, small and distant and eternal, watching over a city where one woman had finally stopped running and learned to fight. The underground poker room in Philadelphia smelled like cigar smoke and desperation, the kind of place where men lost fortunes between midnight and dawn. Green felt stretched across tables lit by hanging brass lamps, their light casting sharp shadows across the faces of 5 dangerous players seated around Alessandro Caruso. The cash stacked in front of him totaled exactly $65,000, the precise amount Noah's surgery would cost. Insurance covered nothing. The hospital would not wait. And tonight, in this room thick with smoke and armed guards positioned at every door, Alessandro would show Valentina Chen something she needed to understand. He had never told her his plan. The first hand dealt at 9:15 in the evening. By 10 o'clock, Alessandro was up 40,000. By 11, the other players had begun to sweat. Not because he was cheating. They knew better than to accuse him of that. They sweated because Alessandro Caruso played with the precision of a man who understood that every card, every bet, every fold was a message written in a language only they understood. Carlo stood behind his shoulder, arms crossed, watching. Nino paced near the back wall, phone in hand, waiting for updates from the hospital. Every 15 minutes, a message arrived on Alessandro's personal phone. A simple text from Dr. Morrison's surgical coordinator. 9:47, valve located and exposed. 10:32, replacement beginning now. 11:03, incision closing. Final vitals optimal. Each time the phone buzzed, Alessandro's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Carlo noticed. After 15 years working for this man, Carlo had learned to read the smallest shifts in his boss's expression. A flicker at the corner of his eye. A breath held half a second too long. The poker game continued. Alessandro raised on a pair of eights, and a man across from him, someone with a scar running from his left ear to his jaw, folded immediately. No one challenged Alessandro Caruso anymore. Not over money. Not over anything. At 11:47, the final message arrived. Surgery successful. Noah is stable. Recovery proceeding normally. Alessandro set his phone face down on the table. His shoulders, which had been carrying a weight no one else could see, dropped almost imperceptibly. He stood. He gathered the $65,000 in cash and placed it methodically into a leather bag, each stack aligned perfectly with the others. The game is finished, he said. His voice carried the weight of finality. Boss, you're up another 30, one of the players said. It was not a question. It was an observation. An offering. Alessandro buttoned his jacket. Everyone in this room knows I could pay for a child's surgery without blinking. I could write a check. I could make a phone call. The hospital would have no choice but to accept. He paused, his dark eyes moving across each face at the table. But that would make this about me. My power. My ability to command. My wealth used to save a life. He lifted the leather bag. This is about something different entirely. Carlo and Nino exchanged a look they had not shared in years. Understanding was beginning to crystallize between them, the kind of understanding that shifted everything about what they thought they knew. This is about showing one woman that she was never invisible, Alessandro continued, his voice steady as stone. That her fight mattered. That a mother who would carry a foreclosure notice in her pocket and sleep in a broken car to protect her child, that woman is not invisible to the world. She is the most visible thing in it. He moved toward the door. The guard stepped aside immediately. The surgery cost what it cost, Alessandro said, turning back one final time. But the message costs everything. Because I am telling her that her son's life is worth more to me than anything in this room. Worth more than the money. Worth more than the game. Worth more than the empire. The door closed behind him. For a long moment, none of the players moved. Nino's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, then at Carlo. He's heading to the hospital now. The hospital's recovery wing was silent except for the steady beep of the cardiac monitor, a rhythm that had been irregular and dangerous for the entire first year of Noah's life. Now it sang a different song. Normal. Healthy. Whole. Valentina sat in the chair beside Noah's bed, her hand resting on his small chest, feeling the strength of his heartbeat through his cotton pajamas. He slept deeply, the kind of sleep that belongs only to children and the innocent. His face, which had worn the strain of sickness for so long, looked younger now. Smoother. like someone had erased the weight from his features while he dreamed. Dr. Morrison entered at midnight exactly, still wearing his surgical cap. He was a man in his 60s with kind eyes that had seen too much suffering to be surprised by anything anymore. The surgery was flawless, he said, and Valentina heard her own hope mirrored in his voice. The valve replacement held perfectly. His arterial pressures are exactly where they need to be. He is going to live a completely normal life, Ms. Chen. A long one. She could not speak. The relief came as a physical force, pushing the air from her lungs, filling her eyes with tears that rolled down her cheeks without sound. Her shoulders shook. Her hands trembled. She had held this fear for so long that releasing it felt like learning to breathe again. "I will check on him in an hour," Dr. Morrison said quietly, and he left her alone with her son. Valentina did not hear the door open 15 minutes later. She only felt the presence of someone tall, someone whose arrival changed the temperature of the room, the pressure of the air itself. She looked up. Alessandro Caruso stood in the doorway in the same black suit he had worn to the poker game, but something in him had changed. His guard, which never truly dropped, had cracked open just enough that she could see something beneath it. Something human. Something that looked almost like vulnerability. He set a leather bag on the table beside her hospital chair. "The surgery is paid," he said. "The hospital stay is paid. The medication is paid. But this is for you. For whatever comes next." She opened the bag. Inside, stacked in precise rows, lay $65,000 in cash. "I cannot take this," Valentina whispered. "You already took it," Alessandro said. He sat down in the chair across from her, and the movement seemed to cost him something. "The moment you stood in that hotel lobby and refused to lie. The moment you chose your dignity over the money Cordelia offered you in exchange for your silence. You took your life back, Valentina. This is simply the recognition of that choice." He looked at Noah sleeping between them, this small boy who had become the pivot point on which the entire world turned. "When my brother betrayed me," Alessandro continued, his voice lower now, more careful, "I learned that mercy toward the wrong person costs everything. It breaks you. It destroys you from the inside out. But mercy toward the right person." He paused. "Mercy toward the right person saves everything." "Why did you really help me?" Valentina asked. Her voice trembled like a candle in the wind. Alessandro was quiet for a long time. The cardiac monitor filled the silence with its steady rhythm. "Because 15 years ago, I was driving on a different highway during a different storm," he said finally. "My son was dying in the back seat. A heart condition. Genetic. We were driving him to a hospital 2 hours away because the local one did not have the equipment. And I was praying, which is something I never do, I was praying that someone would stop. That another car would pull up behind me. That another human being would see us and understand that this was not just a broken-down vehicle. This was a child's life hanging in the balance." He looked at her directly now, his dark eyes meeting hers. "No one stopped," he said. "We made it to the hospital, barely. My son lived. But that night, sitting in a waiting room not so different from this one, I made a choice. I swore that if I ever had the power to stop for someone else's dying child, I would never drive past." Valentina reached across the space between them and took his hand. His grip was strong, warm, steady. "So when I found you broken down in that storm," Alessandro said, "I was not helping a stranger. I was helping the person I swore I would always help. I was keeping a promise I made to myself 15 years ago." They sat like that through the night, watching Noah sleep, listening to his heartbeat in perfect rhythm, while the city of Philadelphia glowed beyond the window and the rain that had fallen so hard on the highway gradually stopped, leaving the world clean and new. 6 months later, Valentina Chen stood in the doorway of a small but clean apartment in a safe neighborhood. The keys felt light in her hand. This was hers. Not borrowed, not temporary, not conditional. Hers. The lease bore her name. The address was one she could give to people without shame. Noah ran through the rooms, his footsteps echoing off hardwood floors, his laughter filling spaces that had never known joy like this. He was strong now. He could run without stopping. He could play without fear. She had rebuilt her life piece by piece. A new job at a logistics company, real salary, real benefits, the kind of job that did not require her to smile while men stole her dignity along with her tips. Alessandro had made one phone call, and the interview had been a formality. But she had earned the position through her own competence. She worked twice as hard as anyone else, arriving early, staying late, building something real. The knock came at 6 o'clock on a Saturday evening. Alessandro stood in the hallway wearing a simple black shirt, no suit, no armor. He looked almost ordinary, and that was somehow more striking than all his power. He looked like a man, not a monument. "I wanted to see how you were doing," he said. She invited him inside. They talked for hours, sitting on the living room floor because her furniture had not arrived yet, eating the pizza Alessandro brought because that was what Noah wanted. The conversation moved easily between them now, about Noah's second-grade teacher who said he was a gifted reader, about Alessandro's efforts to legitimize portions of his business, about the small moments that constituted a normal life. When he stood to leave, it was nearly 9 o'clock. Noah was asleep in his room, exhausted from a day of normal childhood activities. Alessandro paused at the door. His hand rested on the frame. "That night in the storm," he said, "when I found you on the highway, I told myself I was helping you because of Luca. Because of my son. Because of the promise I made." "And now?" Valentina asked. "Now I know the truth," Alessandro said. "I was helping you because seeing you fight for Noah reminded me what it feels like to be human. I spent 15 years becoming something harder than stone. I forgot what softness felt like. What hope felt like. What love felt like." He turned to face her fully. "I have spent 6 months trying to convince myself that walking away was the right thing. That you deserved a normal life. But I cannot stop thinking about you. I cannot stop wanting to be in rooms you are in. I cannot stop wanting to know what you are thinking, what you are feeling, what your dreams look like when you finally feel safe enough to dream them." Valentina stepped closer. Her hand found his in the space between them. "I am still a dangerous man," Alessandro said quietly. "I always will be. That part of me does not change. And I am still a woman who survived on $2, Valentina replied. Who slept in a car? Who carried a foreclosure notice like a prayer card? I think we will be fine." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, the kind of kiss that carries months of silent protection and small gestures finally made visible. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. The final scene shows them sitting on the apartment floor with Noah, eating pizza, laughing at something he said about his teacher's cat. Alessandro's phone rings, Carlo with business. He looks at the screen. He ignores it. For the first time in 15 years, something matters more than the organization. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only love can do that. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to remember that one act of kindness can change everything. Subscribe for more stories of hope, justice, and unexpected love. What should we cover next? Drop your ideas in the comments. New story drops tomorrow.